Welcome back, everybody. As you know, we're having a great conversation with the former governor, the 55th governor of the great state of New Jersey, Chris Christie, and his new book, Republican Rescue, Saving the Party from Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden. I also think, though, and this is where the Liz Cheney piece becomes interesting, the January 6th Commission and its work will be that thing that also hangs out there in that political ether. Now, we don't know what ultimately will come from that. They're taking very seriously their work with the subpoenas and trying to hold folks accountable. How are you assessing the January 6th Commission, its processes, how it's proceeding, and now arguably one of the dominant figures, Liz Cheney, sort of being at the center of that narrative that's occurring right now?
Well, a couple things. First, I think that any of us who understand the history of this country know what a bad day January 6th was, and should not be in the job of making excuses for what happened on January 6th. Were there mistakes that were made by law enforcement that day? Having been in law enforcement for 7 years of my life, there were mistakes made by law enforcement that day. But in the end, my argument has been all along that Donald Trump's speech on January 6th did not incite that riot. It was everything he did from election night forward that got people in that level of anger by telling them day after day after day the election was stolen.
Right.
That's what incited them to be there, and that's what incited their anger. And so he has to be held responsible for that. Now, I think Nancy Pelosi made a fundamental political error in the establishment of the committee by not allowing McCarthy to put the people on the committee that he wanted to.
But wait a minute, Chris, let's be fair. McCarthy sent his emissary to negotiate. They gave him everything he wanted, and he rejected it.
Well, no.
I mean, come on. I think that's a political slant that is not believable, because we all watched it happen real time. We know what Republicans did. You got everything. We got everything we wanted, right? They made demands. Nancy said, "Okay, you can have it." And then what happened? McCarthy, being McCarthy, after going down to Mar-a-Lago and kissing the ring, came back to Washington and changed up.
No, I mean, look, I think that it's always been the case, Michael, that the minority leader is allowed to put on a committee whoever he wants to put on a committee. And when Nancy Pelosi said that both that Jim Jordan was unacceptable to the committee, and others that McCarthy wanted were unacceptable to the committee, I never understood that politically.
I did, because they were being scrutinized and they were going to be investigated. Imagine if Jim Jordan were on the committee right now and being subpoenaed. Come on.
And you know what, Michael? That would be Jim Jordan's problem and Kevin McCarthy's problem. What she's now made it is her problem amongst, and I'm not saying amongst all Republicans, but there are going to be a section of Republicans who are going to say, we're not going to believe anything that this committee comes up with because...
But they weren't going to believe it to begin with.
Smaller subsection.
No, Chris, come on. No. I got to push back on this, dude.
I think
this is baked in.
No, she made a fundamental mistake. If, in fact, everything you're saying is right, she should have let it play out, because they would have ultimately been held responsible for that.
Chris, would you allow, as a prosecutor, would you allow on your jury someone that you're going to be investigating?
Well, you can't.
No, you wouldn't. Just say no, you wouldn't.
No, you can't. Exactly right. You can't. But you know what? The committee's not the jury. This is where your analogy, in my mind, falls. Because the committee's not the jury. The American people are the jury. And the committee is supposed to be the prosecutors, the fact finders for the American people.
Okay, but again, would you allow that individual that we knew before we got to that point? Everybody, Jim Jordan was giving interviews on Fox talking about what he did that day. You mean to tell me you're not, as you're putting together a committee that's going to want to look into that you're going to say, okay, let's put him on the committee? I get your jury analogy. You're right. They're not the jury. But the fact of the matter is they have an investigative authority, and you're going to bring into the hen house the fox that you want to investigate.
Guess what? You serve that person on, if that person has a role to play. And by the way, they also had Banks who they rejected, and I don't think anybody's accused Banks of being involved in any way in all this. They rejected him as well. I think the problem is if Jordan is a witness, which it appears he will be, well, then if he's on the committee, you subpoena him when he's on the committee.
Chris, I just don't believe. Chris, I love you, brother. You know that. I just do not believe that under any other circumstance you would advocate for that type of participation. I mean, I know you're not, but I'm just saying.
What I am saying, though, is that Pelosi set this up to look more partisan than it needed to be.
Yeah, okay. I just don't. I disagree with that simply because she played the hand she was dealt by Republicans.
Again, though, she did not allow the minority leader to do what they normally do. But let's get to Liz for a second. I think Liz has made. Look, I think any of us who know Liz know that she is a very smart, well-taught, and well-learned political operator. She has, learned from her father, who was one of the best.
Yep.
And she's learned on her own a lot. From the beginning, I think this was Liz's strategy, and this is why I think it's been her strategy to be the figure that she's become, not just because she agrees with it factually, Michael, which I believe she does.
Right.
So I'm not saying this is cynical in any way.
Right.
She also looked at the politics and said to herself, I don't want to be the leader in this group anymore. But I don't want to quit, because when she initially tried to keep her position, despite the things that she had said in the aftermath of the election, the caucus supported her overwhelmingly and affirmed her position in leadership in the caucus. And then she went, "Oh God, I didn't think that was going to happen." And then she just kept going. Then she kept upping the ante to the point where we're like, "Okay, if you want us to pick that, we will."
You mean I actually got what I didn't wish for?
That's exactly right. And I think that was her one tactical error in all this. I think she's decided that this is where she is both most comfortable being,
right,
and I think she thinks this is where the party is headed. And I think that's so. In addition to her comfort level based on the facts, I think she also thinks ultimately this is where they're headed. So
right.
Do I think that Liz Cheney's a candidate for president in 24? She very well could be. But first things first, she's got to re-win her seat in Wyoming in 22.
I don't think she does.
Well,
I don't think she does. As a party guy who understands operationally what's going on in her state right now and how that plays out, I think her calculation is better for me if they fire me, if I lose. I mean, look, I can relate to that. I got to a point as RNC chairman when I realized that a lot of folks in this town were pissed because I was screwing with their money, wasn't giving them the cash that they thought they should get, and bringing folks into the party they didn't want at the table, right? That I was like, F it. I'm going to just do me, boo. I'm just going to do me. And I'm going to run for re-election. I'm going to go through the whole thing. Probably not going to win. Reince is stabbing me in the back. I got it, right? You play the card. We went on and we ran a campaign and got a whole hell of a lot of Republicans elected who were on the bubble, who were having issues. I'm thinking of my friend Tim Scott, who was, trying to pull his wagon in South Carolina, getting Nikki Haley elected governor, all these pieces. And of course, my main man, Chris Christie, across the line in Jersey. So at a certain point, you just kind of look at the bigger picture and realize, hey, the end point is not going to be a good one for me. But what I amass and what I'm able to do up to that point may make a bigger difference for me longer term.
Here's what I would argue. I think she's put herself in a position where she can argue it either way.
Yeah.
And I think, though, I do think it would be even more valuable for her in the long term to win, because I think she would then make the argument that even in a very conservative place like Wyoming, that her standing up for the things she believed in were more important to the voters of Wyoming than whether they necessarily agreed with every utterance that came out of her mouth.
Right.
And so And I think she wants to win. I think she's going to try hard to win. I know exactly what you're saying. Look, Matt Mead, who used to be the governor there, good friend of mine who we served as U.S. attorneys together. I got to learn a lot about Wyoming politics when Matt was the governor. He got elected in 2010, right after I got elected in 2009.
Right.
And you know, so I understand that it's a little treacherous out there right now for certain. But I also know that she's the kind of person who will go in and fight on all those things. And she's made her decision on who she is and who she wants to be and what ground she wants to stand on. And I don't criticize her for it. I don't necessarily agree with every political decision she's made, but I do believe she's coming at it from a point of what she genuinely believes. And I'm always going to support people like that.
Well, I was going to say that's kind of like the Chris Christie mold. I mean, you came out of the chute when you ran for governor and made it very, very clear that you were an independent Republican. You had values and principles that aligned, with the party, obviously. But at the end of the day, you know, when you get up in the morning, you look in the mirror, you see the man, and that's who you have to deal with and confront with every day. And I think it says a lot about individuals like her, Adam Kinzinger, and others who look in that mirror and like what they see, whether we agree or disagree with it. In the long run, doesn't matter, because you have to be comfortable with you, right?
Authenticity is the single most important.
Absolutely, absolutely.
In competitive political races, and so if you're not authentic, the public will sniff that out, and they may not sniff it out the first time, but they'll sniff it out eventually, and you will not survive in authenticity. And it's one of the ironic things about Trump, right, Michael? I mean, he is who he is,
right?
And that authenticity is in large degree what's established him as a political force. Because, you know, even though I don't necessarily agree with some of the things the president did, and I've said that in the book, and while he was president, I said it. But I knew that that's what he was going to do. Like, there was no moving him. He is what he is. And people ask me all the time about, as I've known him for 20 years, you know, what's he like in private? And I say, unfortunately, exactly what you see in public.
That's right. You and I know that. There's no change up.
No, and there hasn't been a change up in that, you know, for all the years that I've known him. He's always on stage. He's doing what he's doing, and that's who he is and who he wants to be. And I think in the similar way, Liz Cheney has decided, this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. And whether that means I'm losing my seat in Wyoming, whether I'm losing my leadership position in the Congress in D.C., this is who I am. This is who I'm going to be. And very much in that respect, like her father.
I was going to say, she is the apple from her daddy's tree. There's no doubt about that.
You saw him at the end, right up until the very last day of the Bush presidency, fighting for Scooter Libby.
Yep.
And whether you believe Scooter Libby deserved a pardon or not, Dick Cheney knew what he believed, and he's going to push his boss right up until, you know, noon on January 20th to sign that piece of paper for Scooter Libby. And so I think you look at that, and I've said to use that example to many people who say, I'm surprised about Liz Cheney. I said, you shouldn't be. Look at what her dad did with, and
that's right.
Not to mention, as you and I both know, that, you know, at least as tough a member of the Cheney family is her mom.
Oh.
as opposed to her dad.
Yeah, y'all don't want to mess with Lynn. Y'all don't want to go there.
Every bit is tough. You know, she tells that joke about the fact that, you know, she's only vice president because she married him. And so you were dating that guy who worked at the gas station, and she said, yeah, and that gas station attendant would have been vice president of the United States if I married him. So in that one for sure. So I always have liked Liz. I admire her. I like I said, I don't always agree with everything she does, but hell, dude, I'm sure she doesn't agree with everything I do either.
Right, exactly.
People who stand up for what they believe in and are unafraid. And I think,
well, you mentioned the word authentic and unafraid, and I appreciate that. And the last point before I let you get up out of here, I want to talk about is I watched real time an interesting exchange when you were on Nicole Wallace's program Deadline White House on MSNBC, talking about your book and really getting into booking. Both of you got into this contention over Fox News and the narrative in the book that you go after, where you talk about, as the title of the book says, conspiracies, going after conspiracy theorists, truth deniers, etc., versus bias. So let's take a quick listen to some of that exchange.
The book is called, it's about conspiracies and lies, and you really don't take on Fox News. Why not?
Look, because the book was
Tucker Carlson
because the book. No, I don't watch it, but the book.
Are you aware of what he does?
Not really. I don't pay a lot of attention to it.
It's a book with truth deniers, conspiracy theorists on the cover, and you attack CNN and the New York Times and MSNBC and not Fox.
But excuse me, I don't attack them as conspiracy theorists or truth deniers. I talk about bias.
And is bias more dangerous to the country than conspiracy theorists?
No, but that's the third section of the book, where I talk about the movement forward. In the center portion of the book, we talk about the conspiracy theories and the truth denying that went on with things like QAnon, Pizzagate, the election situation, John Birch Society, and that's what I talk about. There's two sections of the book, and I'm sure accidentally you're conflating them.
I'm not conflating them, but I don't think I don't think it's an intellectually honest case to make against conspiracy theories without taking on Fox News.
Well, listen, then you can write that in your book.
Well, I'm not trying to rescue the Republican Party.
I understand. Well, whenever you want to write your next book,
I guess my question is, you want to run for president. What's your relationship with Fox News going to be?
Well, first of all, I didn't say I wanted to run for president. You said that. So let's be clear about that.
Well, a lot of people have said that in the last 3 days. You haven't corrected anybody.
Well, I understand that.
You're pretty quick to jump in and correct the record.
No, what I've said is that I certainly will think about it, but I won't make any decision for at least another year.
Do you think that Fox News in prime time is good for the country or bad?
Listen, there are shows that I like in Fox News, and there are shows that I don't like. Like there are shows that I like here,
and I don't like. Are you afraid to question the purveyors of conspiracy theories and
By the way, but that's your opinion. You're welcome to your opinion, like everybody else in this country is welcome to your opinion. I don't consider people like Sean Hannity or Laura Ingraham purveyors.
I didn't say either of their names.
Well,
Tucker Carlson.
you said the evening news programs at Fox News.
The 8 p.m. hour.
And as I told you, I don't watch the show.
So in that exchange, you drew a very stark line between what you talk about in the last third of the book about the biases of the media versus conspiracy theory. She was pressing the fact, well, if you don't deal with one of the perpetrators of those conspiracy theories, then you're not being authentic in terms of really trying to rescue the party, because that's what's been driving a lot of the narrative inside of the party. Fox News, writ large, then individual cast of characters leading off with Tucker Carlson. How do you square that? Because there is a difference between perpetuating conspiracies with, as part of a news network, and the bias that we have seen for a generation or more in the media writ large against Republicans/conservatives. And I draw that line very distinctly, having dealt with those biases, as I know you have. But these conspiracy theories are something different. QAnon is something different. Fox perpetuating January 6th is something very different.
Well, look, the argument with Nicole that day was interesting because when I watched, and Nicole and I have been friends for a long time. And so, there were a lot of people who were surprised about us going back and forth with each other like that, given the relationship, but we've always done that.
Right.
I thought the reaction was fascinating afterwards, because I went to watch and see the reaction after the interview. People on the left were saying, "You kicked his ass, Nicole. Way to go. Way to give it to him." And the people on the right were saying, "Way to go, Chris. You called out that hypocrite former Republican and you let her have it. Way to go. You killed her, right? You won that hands down." I think it's indicative of the argument itself, right? To me, and I tried to explain this to her in the clip that you played. Like, I wasn't focused on them as conspiracy theorists in the book. Them or quite frankly, MSNBC on the Russia story. which turns out to have been more than anything else a creation of political operatives outside of the Republican Party. And so I didn't focus on that. My focus on the conspiracy theorists were the actors, the actual actors, talking a lot about Trump in there and Marjorie Taylor Greene and the folks at Pizzagate. What I was trying to say to Nicole was like, I just wasn't the focus of the book. And she's like, it should have been.
Okay.
Well, then you write the book.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, there was kind of this pause where she's like, you're the one who want to rescue the party.
Yeah, right. And I'm like, I don't want to rescue the party. Well, that's pretty clear. I get that. And the other point that I tried to make in that exchange was that, you know, I don't watch Tucker. I just don't. Right. So she's trying to get me to, like, you know, comment on particular things. I don't watch it. And so to me, the book isn't of itself. You pick a place where you want to go. And it wasn't like I picked a non-controversial place, Mike. You know? I mean, now I'm being criticized for not going after Fox News and MSNBC as well. All right. Guilty. I didn't. It wasn't, her implication in that was, you didn't do it because you need Fox News. While I'm sitting on MSNBC, with maybe 5 Republicans watching, right? Like, stop. That's not my motivation. My motivation was, to me, this was a book on how Republicans should rescue the Republican Party and how each and every one of us deals with the adversarial media today is a much more difficult road to navigate, I would argue, even than the bias that you and I had to deal with over the years that still exists. Because there are going to be times where, like, for instance, when Bill O'Reilly had his program and I was governor of New Jersey, I didn't go on the program, to the point where he sent a young Jesse Waters chasing after me at different events, ambushing me, asking me, why won't you come on the Bill O'Reilly show? Mm-hmm. You know, you vote with your presence, you vote with your feet on these things. And that's, you know, I don't go on Rachel Maddow either. Right. I don't know that she would be anxious to have me, but there have been a couple.
I think Rachel would have you. I think Rachel would have you on her show.
So I think, you know, you make these decisions based upon what you believe is right. But the book was certainly not an attempt to be like cagey about that issue.
Or even apologetic of
no, I just deal with it, Michael. And I think my fundamental argument with Nicole that day was, you wanted me to write a different book. I get it. But this is the book I wrote. Can we talk about that, or do you want to talk about the book that I didn't write? You know, so friendship comes in because she's saying in there, I wanted more from you.
Yeah,
as my friend. That's why I didn't get. Believe me, Mary Pat was not at all happy about that interview.
Oh, I know. Mary Pat was not happy about that interview.
But my point of view on it was a display of her friendship to me.
Right.
Because she was saying, I'm disappointed that you didn't deal with this too. And my response is, deal with it, because it wasn't something I omitted by a conscious act.
By choice. So having said that, Governor, do you think you will have, in light of everything that we've talked about, particularly, I think you will have a role, I'll be honest with you, in the next iteration of this GOP. I think our friend Larry Hogan will play a role. But I think that is a very small group of leaders who will emerge in this upcoming new year to terraform, is how I like to put it, the GOP into its better self. But part of that effort is going to be, and I get what you're saying about why it is or isn't, or you did or didn't deal with all of that in the book, in the sense that you and Nicole were discussing. But if you're going to take that role, you're going to have to look over there and see what's happening coming out of Rupert's backyard. And what's in my words, and as someone who worked at Fox for 2 years, I say this not with a great deal of pain, because I know what it was and what it's now become, but that's spewing this infection in our body politic. Whether it's on, I get the politics of Biden and going against Biden, but the continual perpetuation of of narratives that we know aren't true. How do you think you need to deal with that? If you're going to change this party, rescue this party, save the party from the truth deniers who watch Fox, save the party from the conspiracy theories that are promoted, theories and theorists that are promoted by Fox, the dangerous policies of Joe Biden, that part we get. Yeah. But these other two parts, we can put a finger on as well, that lead to a media outlet that has moved into a space that, quite frankly, none of us thought it would. So how do you deal with that?
Well, interestingly, I think that Rupert's starting to deal with it in this respect. That, I guess it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago now, Fox had their annual shareholders meeting. Mm-hmm. And at that shareholders meeting, Rupert Murdoch stood up and said, the election wasn't stolen. To say so is untrue. If Donald Trump wants to be a figure in the party going forward, he's got to stop saying it. He's got to accept his defeat and move the party on to the fights that we're having now on policy regarding Joe Biden. Now, when the founder of Fox News and the father of Fox News is saying that, I got a feeling that that's the canary in the coal mine here on that particular issue and the way we deal with it. And I called Rupert right after that speech, because I was out on the book tour at that time. And I said to him, looks like you and I are singing out of the same hymnal. And he chuckled and he said, look, it's what I believe. And so I think that this is going to be a process. I think one of the things that's really not surprised me, Michael, but I think a good place for us to put a cap on this is that, Donald Trump consumed every particle of oxygen politically in this country for 5 years. From the time he came down that escalator in June of 15, all the way through his leaving office. And we expect all of it to change inside of a year. Mm-hmm. He still has not been out of office for a year. We're still a month away from a year of office. I think it takes time for these things to change, especially when you have someone who, unlike George W. Bush, didn't go away when he left office. Right. He could try to make himself, a powerful, important figure in the party. So I take encouraging signs from people like Rupert standing in front of his shareholders and saying, this is what I believe. And I don't believe he has a role in the party going forward if he does not admit to his defeat and help the party move on to deal with these issues. So I don't know how that's going to trickle down.
It hasn't. It hasn't, because you watch Laura and you watch Tucker. You got Tucker embracing, strong men globally. You have, Laura doing the same. I mean, so it hasn't trickled down. And I think that's where a lot of people are saying, okay, how do you break that narrative? I get Rupert telling that to his shareholders, but just tune into the show that night. And
I think it's going to take, my guess is that, as with anything, when you're trying to change people's point of view, it's going to take some time, is my point. Yeah. But I think it was a very important moment to have Rupert Murdoch do that, because that doesn't mean just the Fox News. That also means the Wall Street Journal, that on the editorial side. That also means the New York Post, and a lot of different things that Murdoch still controls. And we know that he's never been someone who has been uninvolved in the editorial process of his media empire. So I think that's the encouragement I take. But I couch it, Michael, in all this, saying that I'm not sure I'm right.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that I'm right that this stuff will happen. But what I am sure of is that I want to be a part of trying to make it happen.
Well, I'm glad to hear that last part.
That's the best I can do at this point. Yeah. I don't have a crystal ball, but I'm also, one other thing on January 6th, having said what an awful moment it was to sit and watch that going on, and almost unbelievable to me to watch it happening in our country. I also do think, though, that it showed the resilience of the democracy also, because by 4 a.m. that next morning, Republicans and Democrats were all back on the floor of the House and the Senate, and they affirmed that election.
Right.
And like I know a lot of, and the usual response I get from people is yes, but 100 and some Republicans voted not to. And I go, yeah, because it was the easiest vote of their lifetime. They knew they were going to have no impact upon the result of the election, but they were able to pander to their particular constituency and point of view. And I'm sure it's not the first time we've seen that happen.
Yeah, but on the heels of what had just happened, that 140 some members casting that vote the way they did after scrambling for their lives, hearing people call for the execution of the vice president of the United States, a member of their own party. Yeah, that to me, that to me was just, I don't know how to describe it other than heartbreaking from members of my own party who, on the heels of what they just gone through themselves, not that they witnessed third hand, watched it on television, they were in the room, then come back into that room to continue that effort. I think that's where the country just kind of says, damn, you guys are hard ass core. You really do not care about this democratic process.
But I look at the fact that Democrats and a number of Republicans came back, voted that night, and said that we stand for something more, and that the vice president did that. Yeah. Look, everybody's got different opinions on Mike Pence, and you and I both known him for a long time. But he did the right thing.
He did.
Under enormous pressure from the guy who put him in that job. He did the right thing as well. And I think that will always inure to Mike Pence's credit and benefit historically as well, despite whatever you may think about whether he was strong enough as a vice president or not, in light of all of it. At a moment when he could have really wreaked some havoc, he did the right thing. And I write that in the book too, that, Pence deserved much better than what he got from Trump, for sure. And he deserved much better than I think what he's gotten from most of the country at this point for having done it. It's not that I think he deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor for doing it, but I do think we need to acknowledge the fact that when other people, and that's what made me think about it, took the easy way out, Mike Pence did not take the easy way out. He didn't say, I'll do something and the Supreme Court will fix it.
Right.
He said, I'm not gonna get it to that point, and he stood up and did the right thing. All those things give me some encouragement. You know me, I'm a horrible optimist by nature, Steele. So I'm gonna continue to be optimistic about the future of our country
and that's
democracy, and that's why I continue to be involved. Otherwise, I just go out and be a craven capitalist and not worry about any of this stuff.
Dude, I can appreciate that. The book is Republican Rescue: Saving the Party from the Truth Deniers, Conspiracy Theorists, and the Dangerous Policies of Joe Biden. The man is the former two-term 55th governor of the great state of New Jersey, the once and future presidential candidate, and just an all-around good guy, the original in-your-face kind of politician that I admired going back to the day. Chris Christie, thanks, man, for taking a moment to stop in and have a conversation.
Always great to talk to you, Michael. Happy New Year to you and everybody listening.
Happy New Year to you, Mary Beth, and the family as well. Folks, that does it for this conversation. I appreciate you stopping in and taking some time with us. Don't forget to do the things that make me feel all yummy inside, like downloads and 5-star ratings and all of that. Check us out on Stitcher, TuneIn, Apple Podcasts, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be there. Until next time, be safe, get vaxxed, don't be stupid. Come on, wear the mask. Omicron is for real. Trust me, it is for real. We want to see you all in the new year. Until then, be blessed.